Today, we become legends.
So I'm not usually one to be too critical of balance changes in Smite. I'm not the guy who sees a god they don't like getting buffed by 10 damage and starts freaking out, but as a solo main, I have to speak out about the direction Smite is going right now in terms of tanks, damage, and percent penetration. Before we start, I just want to say that this video is not me advocating for a tank meta, it's simply my thoughts on the current tank hate we've been seeing in the last couple of seasons in Smite. A balanced meta is a fun meta. A meta where you can play what you want and not feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot by not playing other things is a fun meta. I'm not saying this is easily done. No game will have a perfectly balanced meta unless it's a game where everyone plays the exact same character with identical stats and moves, and that's no fun. But with the start of Season 7, Titanforge, the developers of Smite, seem to have set themselves on a warpath against tanks. Solo laners are taking the brunt of this, but supports are getting hurt by this too. The changes to magical items at the start of this season were understandable. Obsidian Shard in the past of Smite has been the only way to shred tanks as a mage, unless you're a specific case that uses demonic grip. It's more fun to have a variety of items that you can choose from to make up your percent pen as a mage, instead of just default buying Obsidian Shard in every build, even though you pretty much still do that anyway. However, something that's fun is not always balanced, just like something that's balanced is not always fun. The general structure of Smite's meta has always been that tanks kill mages and assassins, but hunters kill tanks, but assassins and mages kill hunters. It's almost a rock, paper, scissors system. Tanks kill mages and assassins since they burn their abilities very quickly and don't kill the tank, and then they're just a sitting duck to get beaten on. But hunters shred tanks since they have consistent damage with no cooldowns and access to extremely efficient penetration. But assassins and mages have much higher burst damage than hunters, and so will kill them easily before they can utilize their sustained damage to win the fight. Tanks outfight the cooldown based damage dealers because defense is efficient. The cooldown based damage dealers one-shot the sustained damage dealers, aka the hunters, and the hunters don't have cooldowns on their damage, so they kill the tanks very easily. This is massively oversimplified and won't be the case for all team fights, matches, or gods, but in general, this is how Smite's meta has worked for years. If you're wondering where supports come into all this, supports kind of sit outside of this love triangle and impact all three playstyles. Supports can CC frontliners so their hunters can shred, supports can protect their mages from tanks diving them by CCing and peeling, supports can help their tanks dive the backline in some cases. In general, supports aren't a part of this rock paper scissors system, they're more of an accessory on the outside that can impact the fight at any level depending on the support you're playing and what's needed. Now that was a lot of preamble about the meta and how things work, but I promise you it's relevant to the topic I want to talk about. Because with Season 7, this rule has been fundamentally broken. With the unprecedented access to percent pen on both mages and assassins, along with other broken tank hate items like Heartseeker and Soul Reaver, tanks actually lose to mages and assassins now, which fundamentally disrupts the whole cycle of the meta. In the early days of Smite, Titan's Bane and Obsidian Shard were the only items that existed for ability-based mages and assassins to get percent pen, and hunters had Executioner of course. These items used to have 33% pen and that was it. Pretty simple. This was pretty powerful, but a lot of other items didn't destroy tanks in the same way that items do nowadays, and tanks in general were a lot stronger. Solo laners had bigger leads coming out of lane and better items, so it was understandable that access to 33% pen was available so cheaply to these characters, otherwise they would just be literally helpless against a solo lane dive. However, in Season 5, these two items were changed to only provide 20% pen at the start, but scale up to 40% for Titans or 45% for Obsidian Shard, as the target has more protections up to 175. This change basically made the items worse at dealing with squishier targets, but better at dealing with tanks. These items existed in this form, providing incredibly powerful 40% protection shred against tanks for 2 seasons until the start of Season 7, where we've seen the penetration changes to both mage items at the start of the season and in the mid-season patch of Season 7, where assassin and hunter penetration items were overhauled. Instead of just buying Obsidian Shard or Titan's Bane and having all the pen you need, you can instead buy a range of percent pen items, but the cap of percent pen is still 40%, you can't get higher than that. Aside from in specific cases like Obsidian Shard and Titan's Bane's passives, which we'll talk about later. See, the thing is that most of these items that now have percent pen that are making up your build where you don't have to just buy that one item, are actually efficient items that you wanted to buy in your build anyway. So it turns out that you can actually just get a full 6 item build now without having to waste a slot on an item that was ultimately terrible in terms of stats but necessary if you wanted to hit tanks for any damage at all. You can still build these two items. Titan's Bane and Obsidian Shard are still very good, mostly because they allow you to bypass the penetration cap of 40%, which is just even more tank hate. Instead of buying Titan's Bane and having 40% pen against tanks like you did before, you buy Titan's Bane plus 2 other items that give 10% pen, and you have 40% at all times, but also an additional 20% on your first ability every 10 seconds. So you now have 60% pen on your first ability and the same 40% you always had afterwards without really impacting your build at all. Like, you really don't have to sacrifice anything for this, because the items that now have percent pen on them were items that you were already building in your assassin build in the first place. However, percent pen isn't the only thing that's causing this meta where tanks are getting shredded by literally everybody. There are also other tank hate items that aren't specifically penetration based. Heartseeker is the worst offender of this by far. Even before the mid-season patch, this item alone would carry assassins in the late game and allow them to actually hit tanks pretty hard regardless of the rest of their build. Being able to hit for 6% max health damage on all of your abilities is already a ton of extra damage against those tanks. 6% of 2500 HP is 150 extra damage per ability, and that's a pretty low end estimate for tank HP. Yet for some reason they buffed this item in the mid-season patch by adding percent pen onto it just to hammer home the fact that this item is for killing tanks, just in case some potato brain hadn't figured that out yet, and also reducing the cost of the item for no reason at all. Soul Reaver is basically the magical equivalent of Heartseeker, also having 10% pen and a passive that does up to 7% max health damage on your abilities, so everything I just said about Heartseeker applies to this item as well. The culmination of all these changes to percent pen and tank hate items basically results in tanks, specifically solo laners, not being able to do their job in teamfights. 1cc means instant death for a tank nowadays because all 3 of the enemy damage dealers have the potential to shred them down in an instant, whereas in the past it was only the ADC that could truly shred tanks in this way. You might notice that I haven't ranted in the same way about hunter items that serve the same purpose. I've not complained about Executioner, or the fact that hunters get upwards of 60% pen with an Executioner Titan's Bane combo, or that Kin's Size does 5% max health on basic attacks that have effectively no cooldown and can hit up to twice per second pretty easily. No, none of that, and it will remain that way, because I have no problem with hunters being able to melt frontliners in the late game. Positioning correctly and prioritising the right targets, having your other teammates deal with the hunters, is part of being a solo laner in teamfights. It's the fact that not only do you have to worry about hunters shredding you, you now have to do the same thing about assassins and mages. You basically can't dive a backline anymore as a solo laner without just getting instantly nuked. Titans seem to think that these changes in the mid-season patch will help tanks because assassins can't just build one item, Titan's Bane, and instantly shred tanks, but it's actually the opposite. Whether they don't understand this or are just straight up lying, who knows? But if we keep on this path, tanks will literally be pointless and we'll go into a meta where solo laners will just be building full damage and teamfights will be over in 5 seconds. It's important to find a balance between tanks and damage dealers to make the game fun for both sides. We've had horrific tank metas in the past, and maybe these changes are Titan's way of sticking it to us filthy solo mains that enjoyed those metas in the past. Tank metas aren't fun for most people, but in my opinion, what's happening right now is just as dangerous and can create a meta just as unhealthy as the Season 2 tank meta or the Dirty Bubble meta. I don't know what the point of this video was, maybe it doesn't have a point, but I hope that it can inspire some discussion about the topic because I'm really concerned about the direction Smite is going down in this specific case. Smite has been improving over the last few years for sure, and I don't want to see all that work reversed by stupid decisions like these penetration changes and the lack of attention to the fact that solo lane is frustrating as hell and unfun right now. Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm sure we can have some interesting discussions about this down there, and maybe you have some points I didn't mention here, but that's it for me for now. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.